Hello and welcome to Quartzlight, your car brochure channel, and in today's episode it's the turn of the Fiat Tipo. Welcome back, and if you're new to Quartzlight, we're a very small channel here on YouTube looking at car brochures from around the world for the 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. Sometimes beyond that scope as well, but if you're interested in cars or indeed car brochures, please consider subscribing. Anyway, back to today's episode for the Fiat Tipo. It arrived in 1988 and ran till 1995, and it was designed by what's referred to as the Idea design house, and they came up with an interesting design. Also interesting with the Tipo, it was a fully galvanized shell, so I think they was a little bit worried about Fiats of old always losing sales for rust protection. He was a galvanized one, and actually it sold pretty well here in the UK. But anyway, let's have a look at today's brochure and we'll look at a few of those little design cues. Okay, so here is today's brochure, and it's dated December 1990, so reasonably early in the Tipo's life. Sometimes this was referred to as a Type 160. Now, when we referred to it being designed by the Idea House, Idea, IDEA, that's supposed to stand for the Institute of Development in Automotive Engineering. Although I suppose if it's supposed to spell idea, it really should be engineering automotive, I guess. And they were responsible for quite a few designs. Think about things like the Lancia Dedra, Fiat Tempera, Alfa Romeo 155, Lancia Delta. So some quite amazing designs. This particular one was a very boxy design, but it was very cleverly designed because there was lots of room for the passengers. At the start, only available as a 5-door hatch. Later on, they facelifted it in 93 and they brought out a 3-door model. Interesting design really on this brochure, very artsy. And in fact, the Fiats at this time, the brochures all had this common sort of theme. So think, I don't know, a Tempera in that theme. It would fit in there quite nicely. I always thought the Tipo arrived at a really good time in 88 actually, because the big three, Ford Vauxhall, Austin Rover, hadn't brought out a new model in this range for quite some time. So this was kind of like a new boy on the scene. So like I say, it did quite well in the UK, particularly at the start. Also because of that clever design, lots of room inside, more room inside than a Ford Sierra, believe it or not, and obviously this was competing against an Escort, so you can see how that would win out really well. But anyway, let's open the brochure up and see what's inside. Okay, so we open it up. First page is kind of like a bit of a flap, and really it's telling us here that it won the Car of the Year 1989 with this clever design. And the brochure is quite clever. It opens up to reveal this large picture of the Tipo. It's telling us here the Tipo's wind cheating shape gives a CD of only 0.31, which is quite respectable, for improved performance and economy with reduced wind noise. Large windows give excellent all-round vision, best interior width and headroom in its class. The top here, it still continues to tell us about, Car of the Year 1989. Must be a lowly spec, this one, with the black bumpers and the wheel trims. We'll have a little bit of a look at the specs a little bit later on. Key features for me are this unusual back window, how it slopes away. Very boxy rear end with these big boxy rear lights. I kind of like the real cues of this particular car, and I think it was even the base models were reasonably well equipped. This one's showing a sunroof on it. So another very large picture of the Tipo. This is a higher spec one, the DGT. See, there's lots of red lower panels on front and rear. Gives a good idea of the rear and that sort of darkened area in the glass. Very reminiscent, and certainly reminds me of the Tipo from old. Different wheel trims on there, but they are still wheel trims by the looks of it. It tells us a little bit here that it says it's the first mass market car to follow Porsche and Audi in galvanising 100% of exposed metal for lifelong protection against corrosion. Did this work? Did they last longer? I think they certainly lasted longer than Fiats of old, that's for sure. If we zoom into some of these little pictures, I think this is telling us about those galvanised metal. Let's have a look at that. There we go. So it's telling us that all that grey is galvanised sheet steel and the darker shading is composite and materials. So certainly making it a vehicle that should last a lot longer. Interior wise, I do particularly like these seats, I must admit. They do look quite nice. You know, with the sort of bolstering on the side and this nice sort of fabric. It says the 1.4 formula, which must be the base model, 1.4S, 1.7D, elegant tweed cloth upholstery, orthopedically contoured seats with stepless rake adjustment for an ideal driving position, front seat belt mounting adjusts to suit any height, and this sort of tweed material going up the doors. I quite like that tweed as a seat material. Unusual dash at the top, it's sort of like a stepped design. We'll probably be able to see it better later on, but there was two types. There was kind of like the lower end models which had quite conventional gauges, and sort of like the higher spec models had these digital dash gauges, which were supposed to be quite controversial and a little bit unreliable, but I guess a sign of the times, looking a bit more futuristic. Then the next page is this lovely big picture of the interior, really big picture. This is a higher spec one with the velour interior, and it gives you a better idea of the sort of like slopey stepped type dashboard, which looks interesting. Looks like this is probably the electronic dashboard on this particular model as well. It says DGT and TDS models, stylish interior trimmed in elegant velour cloth, exceptionally generous rear head, leg and shoulder room, adjustable steering column to suit all sizes. Radio may differ from versions shown. It also on the side here kind of like tells us that What Car magazine described the Tipo's interior as TARDIS-like, appearing to bigger inside than its outside. So like I say, that was a real draw with this car. It's quite a small car externally, but there was a lot of passenger room, and I think that was the main little clever idea really with this design. Here we can also look at that hatch, making it a very practical hatchback. Again, it highlights these very large rear lights with this blackened area in there as well. Of course, split seats, probably 60-40. A little bit of an idea how you can split those. Yeah, it does say that 60-40 split, how you can split them to any way you wanted. And then a little bit look at these practical big doors to get in, and you also see this model's got a sunroof on there as well. So I do like this brochure. There's not a lot of pages on, but the pages it has are really nice big images of them, and we'll zoom in on some points. Of course we can see straight away this is now showing that very interesting digital dash. Like I say, it was very controversial when it came out and not very reliable, but it looked quite futuristic there. So I do appreciate that. I always find though with conventional dials, they're a million times easier to read than these electronic ones, but I still like these electronic ones. I don't know why. Really talking about the diesels here. So there's two diesel engines available for the Tipo at this time, 1.7 diesel and a 1.9 turbo diesel. You really wanted a turbo diesel. The standard 1.7 I don't think was that quick, but we'll zoom in on a little bit of this text and then we'll look at a few more little things. So on here, first of all, it's talking about this 1.7 diesel, showing it does 57.6, doing the constant 56. So very good sort of like motorway slugger really, isn't it? Because even at 75 it was still doing 42.2. So a good car if you're doing lots of miles, but like I say, not very quick. Here it's really highlighting the 1.9 turbo diesel does 0 to 62 in 12 seconds, top speed 109, making that a lot better. There is some figures at the end of the brochure we'll look at, but I think out of the two, if you was getting a diesel, you'd really want that turbo diesel, I think. Now, this dashboard, so quite a nice looking dashboard, but the main thing about this picture really is that digital dash, straight steering wheel with no Fiat badges, and of course no airbags, so a very flat looking steering wheel. But an interesting dashboard, isn't it? Even though it didn't get much praise, only available on the higher spec models as well. So I've also just quickly zoomed in on this top of the range one. This is that turbo diesel. You can see the wipers on them front headlights. You can also notice on this one, if you go to the back, you can see that fuel filler cap kind of like runs against the line of the bodywork there. I'm sure that made it, a little bit cheaper to produce. Then we get to the end of the brochure and the specifications, although Fiat preferred to call this the fact finder, showing the different models in the range. So if we zoom in, I think it's quite well laid out with these pictures actually. First of all, looking at the base models, in this case the 1.4 Formula and 1.4S with a 1372cc engine, top speed 100 miles an hour, 0 to 62 in 13 seconds. So that came with features such as 5-speed gearbox, of course, you won't really expect anything less. A tilt and slide glass sunroof with blind on the 1.4S. Rear screen wash wipe. And a 4-speaker digital stereo radio cassette. So not too bad for a very base model. Next up, we've got the 1.7D. Top speed of 93, and this is kind of like the problem with not having a turbo, 0 to 62 in 17.8 seconds, but good fuel economy. Moving down, that gives us things like twin door mirrors, fully adjustable, that 60/40 rear seat, locking petrol cap, and a luggage compartment lamp. Lights up when you lift the hatch. How exciting. Moving up now to the 1372cc DGT. Similar performance, exactly the same performance as the other 1.4, 100 miles an hour, 0 to 62 in 13 seconds. It's also showing that you can get that as a 1.6 as well. 16 DGT and 16 DGT selector. Selector would have been the automatic. So maximum speed 107 for the manual, 0 to 62 in 12 seconds. Surprised it doesn't increase the speed by that much, really, does it? Advanced digital instrument and adjustable steering column. So this is where you get your digital dash on your DGT models. Electric front windows with key out closing, central door locking, plus tinted glass as well, so quite well equipped. Then we get a real top model here, don't we? A 16 DGT SX, same engine, so that same top speed as the 1600. And look at this, we can even add as a 1.8 IE. 1756cc engine, speed now increasing 116 miles per hour, 0 to 60 in a more respectable 10.9 seconds. So we've got power assisted steering available also on selector, electric tilt and slide glass sunroof, heated door mirrors with near side remote adjustment. And then finally your ultimate Tipo at this time, the 1.9 TDS, your turbo diesel, 1929cc, maximum speed 109, 0 to 60 in 12 seconds, plus that fantastic fuel economy. It really was probably the model to pick here. So we got headlamp wash wipe. It says also on the SX models that as well. Integral front fog lamps. Heated and height adjustable driver's seat. That's also on your SX as well. Strange that it's only heated driver's seat. And a turbo boost. There we go. Talks about the speed again. And then we get this little bit of technical data, really just showing all that information we've looked at side by side, so you could pick the model you wanted by comparing it to the other models, I guess. So more of the Fiat Fact Finder. I'm not going to really talk too much about this, but of course, if it's possible, I know the writing's only very small, but I think you may be able to pause the screen and read some of that if you really wanted to. And at the bottom, it's kind of like comparing the specifications for those models side by side. The most basic one on the left, and then the far right is going to be that turbo diesel model. Interesting, that selector is telling us it's a CVT. We didn't really talk too much about CVTs, did we, in the 90s? It's more all about CVTs now, how much everyone, we don't like a CVT, but there was a CVT being used and nobody really talked about it. Personally, I don't mind CVTs. It's an automatic, so who cares? Some more specifications. Then in the far bottom there, it's telling us metallic paint is optional on all the different models. And then right at the very bottom there is the date, December 1990. And obviously that's your little square that your Fiat badge would normally appear in. So there we go, that is the end of today's Quarterlight episode and the Fiat Tipo. That space inside the Tipo was of course the real selling point, really, wasn't it? But apparently had great handling as well. If you do remember these cars, or you've driven one or owned one, please do jot it in the comments. I always love hearing your stories. But for now, please do like and subscribe if you've not done already. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care and goodbye.